One supplement, countless benefits. There is one supplement that is very affordable, very convenient, easy to take, and it helps way beyond sport performance. It literally supercharges your brain with energy. It can even overcompensate for lack of sleep, and if used correctly, it will support recovery as well. My name is Paolo, and today I'll break down a supplement that even your mom and grandma should be taking. If you are experiencing drop in energy later in the training, if your later rounds in sparring, for example, are slower and sluggish and you just can't make yourself to be more explosive, or if you feel you are losing power out of nowhere, there is one thing that can be done. If your work is very demanding and you are on an irregular sleep schedule, or you just have a bad sleep, or in daily life, if you are experiencing brain fog, lack of focus, problem with concentration, this can be the answer. In our body, we have multiple ways how to get energy, from carbs, fat, even ketone bodies. However, before body chooses to extract energy from these sources, there is one more way that is more preferred by body. There is very little waste, and it is way more efficient. You see, when we break down carbs and fats, they are ultimately turned into ATP, adenosine free phosphate. That's our energy unit in the body. When this molecule is broken down, that's where the energy is released. And there is a way how to recycle this ATP molecule back into action for another cycle of immediate release of the energy. And this is where creatine comes in. Creatine in the body is never alone. It's carrying a phosphate. And if there is creatine with the phosphate in the cell, the phosphate is offered for recycling of ATP. So more creatine in the muscle means more fast energy recycling and repeated action. And thanks to that process, we can sustain more and resist fatigue a little bit longer. This is just the beginning. Lately, there was a huge focus on using creatine for cognitive function, and it's showing very promising results. So this is not just for bodybuilders to be big and buff or for sprinters to be more explosive. And it is definitely not causing water retention, or at least not in a way that is normally understood, but I'll get back to that. At first, we need to clarify certain facts. When we give creatine to the body, it's not magic, it's physiology. There are limits to it. On that performance level, people who will benefit the most are people who are relying on explosive power and they have kind of enough time to recover in between. Even very well-trained people will have this burst lasting only for 6, 8, max 10 seconds. And afterwards, it takes around 90 seconds up to 2 minutes to have the same potential in the muscle again. So if you're just going for a jog, there is not real benefit to it. If you're doing repeated sprints, repeated bursts of energy, repeated lifts, or your kind of performance is just up and down on the intensity scale, this is where the real potential is showing. However, there is also side benefit to creatine supplementation. As a side effect, creatine helps to hold and store more glycogen, which is your glucose in the cell for the energy. Which means that not only it has benefits on its own, helping with that explosive repeated power, but it helps you to store more energy that will be used later on. And because glucose, when it's pulled into the cell, is taking water with it, that's where the water retention myth is coming into place. Yes, it is holding water, it is retaining water, but the purpose is that you are getting more energy stored directly in your muscle cell, which is definitely worth it. Another great benefit of the creatine is, as I touched on it before, it helps deliver energy to the brain. Recently, there were studies done with elderly people with Alzheimer and creatine supplementation. These people, just within a couple of weeks, were showing absolutely great results in their cognitive capacity, which was surprising even for the researchers themselves. Also, there is some anecdotal evidence that is showing that if people use creatine in case they are sleep deprived or they had very bad sleep, it can help them to keep clear mind and function way better than without the creatine supplementation, just because the creatine helps with that direct supply of the energy to the brain. So this supplementation helped people to be more sharper, more focused, even when they were really not rested optimally. In case they need to push through temporarily, this is a great compensation mechanism. Of course, it's not replacing the sleep, but as a temporary solution to be able to function and think properly, even under fatigue, it works. Creatine is naturally occurring. However, to eat that much meat, beef, which is the main source in nature, would be physically impossible to get enough of it for our actual benefit. Creatine is second most tested supplement on the market after caffeine and is generally considered absolutely safe unless there is specific allergy or intolerance, which is frankly super rare. There are different types of creatine you can get on the market. However, just basic creatine monohydrate with no additives, no flavoring, it's the best way to go. There are some brands that are producing hydrolyzed creatine, but honestly, the only benefit there is probably the benefit they get from selling it for a higher price. General long-term recommendation is 5 grams a day, and always remember to drink plenty of water. As I said before, it's necessary for that glycogen uptake into your muscles. Some people will claim there is necessity for uptake phase, which means that for when we're starting with the supplementation, we'll be taking some increased amount for first week or two just to saturate the muscles first. However, if you're planning to take it on a long term, then this saturation phase is absolutely not necessary, because within first 2-3 weeks, your saturation will be fully reached and there is no reason for anything extreme. One tip that also goes with that water recommendation is for better absorption. It's showing that it's really good to have the creatine when you have your carbs, especially fast carbs that will increase the insulin, and you also at the same time getting the carbs that can be taken into the glycogen stores, glucose in your muscles, with the creatine, so win-win. If you don't do that, it's not a big deal, it's just an efficiency tip. And other than that, doesn't really matter whether you take creatine right after training, before training, or first thing in the morning. That is most likely not going to have any significant impact that you could feel. Another common question and dilemma is cycling and off-cycling. There is no real reason why we should off-cycle creatine. Me personally, I only off-cycle creatine if I run out of it and I still don't have the new one delivered, and that probably takes 1 or max 2 days. And that is not strategic thinking, that's more a strategic mistake. Creatine can be used continuously for as long as you like. It can and should also be used on the rest days because, well, it supports the recovery as well. For that special cases or special situations when we need that cognitive boost because of the sleep deprivation or so on, 25 grams is showing like a very good limit to go to. However, if you've never done it before, don't go that aggressive from the beginning. There is no real danger outside of stomach distress just because you are not used to it, and possibly diarrhea. Also, that should be done as an emergency, one in a time thing, not a regular dosage for every day. Again, it's not going to compensate for the sleep, it's just going to help you function through that time where you are sleep deprived or strongly fatigued. Nothing can replace sleep. For age restriction, as I said, if elderly are using it, it's only going to benefit them. However, on the other side, it's not really tested, proven, or in any way studied long-term on teenagers or kids, and I would generally not recommend it to anybody under 17, 18 years old. There is no real reason not to take it, it's just not studied, not proven, and well, they can wait a couple of years. One big thing that needs to be addressed when talking about creatine is creatinine. Creatinine is a compound that you can find in your blood test. It's very common that people who do strength training or some kind of activity that requires that explosive power burst will have creatinine higher on their blood test. This is nothing alarming. If you have more muscle breakdown from this kind of activity, you will also have more creatinine in the blood. It will be eliminated by body naturally through the urine, and that's why you can find it in the system. If it's chronic and it doesn't disappear even when you stop strength training, that is definitely something to be more concerned about. But if you just did strength training day before your blood test and your creatinine is a little bit higher, there is nothing to fear. If you just want to make sure, give it 2-3 days rest, go for the test again, and you will most likely see that it will drop back to the optimal range. If you're already taking creatine, amazing. If you haven't taken creatine yet, it's definitely something worth trying. It is very affordable, it is very safe, and well, if you are not feeling any benefits in a month or 6 weeks, you can just stop. 5 grams a day, have it with water, have it with carbs for better absorption, and there is no need for loading phase. If you want that cognitive boost, 20 to 25 grams as a one-time thing. My name is Paolo, thank you very much for watching. Send this video to 2 people. First, somebody who you genuinely care about and you want to help them. And second, somebody who, in your opinion, really needs that cognitive boost, but don't tell them who is who. If you have any additional questions or comments, comment under the video or reach out directly to me. Thank you, see you next time.